Remember when you were making out with your first girlfriend, and you came right as she touched your leg? It was me, Barry.
Such an amazing and beautiful moment for ReZero. Subaru taking one good look at his hand, realizing just the damage he's doing to his body, but he's like, you know what? This isn't enough to stop me. This isn't enough to stop me from saving those around me. And this really just puts in perspective a lot about Subaru's thoughts on people around him, but also how he feels about his own body. And this kind of continues the discussion of his character development from Season 2. One of the big aspects that I've talked about considerably in my reviews for Season 3 of ReZero is that Subaru is trying to love himself more. That is a big aspect of his character development that he learned from not just Echidna, but also from Satla when he was in the Witch's Tea Party. And he absolutely loathes himself. He does not like himself. That was a big thing. And he was willing to damage his body, willing to basically lose his humanity just to be able to save people. You know, die on repeat, so to speak. And even though necessarily Subaru's still willing to do that to a degree, he's not going to just willingly throw his life away. But that doesn't necessarily mean that extends upon how his body is. For instance, damaging his hand and his arm beyond repair permanently just to be able to free Crush from the curse of the dragon blood. It's legitimately a very heroic and sad scene. It's a mixture of a lot of emotions, and it's just like, I can't help but feel sad, but also it just shows the growth of his character, but also he still has a lot more to grow as well. That there is still some flaws in his logic, that he is willing to literally destroy his body at the cost of everyone around him. And basically what I'm trying to say here is that he's not going to throw his life away, but he will make his living existence an actual hell if it means to protect those around him. So it's kind of sad. But anyways, let's talk a little bit more in depth with this episode before I get into this scene. So this is the last episode of ReZero Season 3 Cour 1, and it will not be returning until February 5th of 2025. Now, that sounds like a long time, and it is definitely going to feel like a long time, because obviously having no ReZero weekly for the next few months is going to be absolutely painful. But it is much better than waiting a few years to 4 or 5 years for a follow-up. We only gotta wait about 2.5 months, and then ReZero will return, and if it gives us just as much quality as we've gotten from Cour 1, I think all of us that are mega fans of ReZero will definitely be okay with waiting for a follow-up. Now, there is a few things I want to talk about. And that is the fact that we already know the episode count for Cour 2 of ReZero Season 3. It's going to be, once again, another 8 episodes, going up to a total of 16 episodes to conclude Arc 5, aka this is the arc we're currently in. And yes, all the 8 episodes for the next Cour is going to be, once again, be focusing on this exact same arc. Now, before people kind of get concerned, yes, Arc 6 is still going to be getting adapted, and it is under the name of the production of Season 3, and for those that are unaware, yes, Season 3, at least from everything we know currently, it's going to be over 30 episodes long. Now, we don't necessarily know when Cour 3 is going to start, but if I had to take an educated guess, once Cour 2 wraps up, they'll probably do the exact same thing. They'll probably say, give us about another 2 months or so, or 3 months, and we'll be back for Cour 3 of ReZero, which most likely, judging by that time period, they'll most likely have about a 12 episode release, and then, you know, we'll go into Cour 4, and it'll probably have like 10 to 12 episodes as well. But I think one of the big reasons why Cour 1 and Cour 2 is just 8 episodes in general is most likely because of just the length of the episodes. I mean, the first episode, let's be blunt here, was an hour and a half, okay? And let's really think about this. An average anime episode, okay, in a time bracket, like a time slot bracket, is going to take up 30 minutes on television. That's including the ads, okay? And the thing is that means an hour and 30 minutes is 3 episodes. So if we look at the episode count, okay, of ReZero Season 3, we have 8 episodes, okay? But if we factor in the actual time that was put into, like, the first episode, that means that in total, it winds up to around 10, almost 11 episodes of ReZero. So it is the similar amount of episodes that a normal anime has, it's just we got the episodes a lot quicker, thanks to the first episode being an hour and a half movie length. On top top of that, there is something I have been neglecting to discuss, and I think it is a very important detail that showcases the commitment that White Fox has for this project over most anime series you see adapted today. So let's get into that one. White Fox has been notorious for making extended long-length episodes of Re:Zero. Now, this episode in particular is 23 minutes long, almost 24 minutes long. It's the length of an average anime episode. But when you take a hard look at, like, previous episodes, most of their episodes, straight up, are almost 30 minutes long. And this might not seem like anything too crazy to think about, because obviously it fits in within the time bracket of, you know, releasing on TV. But you gotta remember that when stuff like this airs on TV, there's ads placed inside of it. That means that that's kind of how they make some money. And the fact that Re:Zero is actively airing in Japan at 29 to 28 minutes long, that means that they're effectively removing ads from the product on live television in Japan because they have so much faith in the product selling well and doing well overseas and in Japan that they are disregarding advertisement itself. That is legitimately insane and risky for a company to do. I talked about this when they did this for Season 1, and I talked about it in Season 2. But now that, you know, Season 3 Cour 1 is wrapping up, I think it's a perfect time to talk about this, that once again, we see that commitment to Re:Zero, that they're willing to forego ad revenue just to be able to make the episodes longer than they needed to be. And I think that if there is anything that truly showcases the actual team's overall ideology of the Re:Zero project, it is definitely that. We obviously can look at the voice acting, to the animation, the art, and everything else in between, but I think when it comes down to the brass tacks of things and we look at the actual money involvement, when you have the actual company and studio disregarding potential money earned from ads, it shows that there is a very committed and passionate team. And that is what I truly love about Re:Zero. No matter how much I watch this series, every time I see an episode that is over the average length, I realize that it's not just the staff that's giving it their A-game. The actual big head honchos, the people in suits, are even so confident in Re:Zero that they disregard that. That's crazy. That is legitimately crazy. You don't even see that done for, like, JJK, for instance, which, once again, very wild. So, okay, I've gone on a little bit of a tangent, but, anyways, Re:Zero Season 3 Cour 1 has effectively ended, and it's sad, man, because, it feels like it just started. It literally feels like it was just the other day, a few weeks ago, when I started talking about Episode 1, and Episode 8 has arrived, and it is over. It's gonna be painful. It's gonna be painful for these next few months. So anyways, let's give the proper review to this final episode before I dive into some nitty-gritty stuff from the previous episodes. So the episode begins where all of our group of characters have assembled in the town hall and they're discussing their plan of action. And it's very fitting because the next core is called the Counterattack Arc, or Counterattack Cour or whatever, which technically it's fitting because obviously the entire episode is our cast of characters coming together, formulating a plan, and trying to figure out how they could fight back against the Sin Archbishops, Lust, Wrath, Gluttony, and Greed himself. So obviously, it's a pretty bad situation, and they need to be able to effectively spread their forces out to be able to deal with the situation effectively, because Subaru is someone that's very knowledged when it comes to fighting Sin Archbishops. Just one wrong move, and you're dead. It's over. I mean, we've seen this with, obviously, Sloth in Season 1. We've seen elements of just the absolute might of Greed at the beginning of Season 2. That's not even including Season 3. We saw the damage Gluttony was able to do at the beginning of Season 2 as well. So when you factor this, just one wrong move, it's over. And that's not even getting into Wrath as well, that we saw at the beginning of Season 3. So, yeah, having the right person face a Sin Archbishop is incredibly important, because you have to factor in their authority as well. For instance, we know Sloth had, like, the unseen hand, which basically meant that he could attack and you couldn't really see him. Obviously, there was counters to him, but it doesn't change the fact that, you know, they're dealing with stuff that isn't necessarily a quote-unquote divine blessing. It is an authority, it's very different, it is not what a divine blessing is, and they can definitely cheat or distort reality to a certain degree. I mean, let's look at Wrath. Wrath, at the beginning of Season 3, her very ability is soul manipulation to a degree. She's able to, like, soul wash people or brainwash people and cause emotions to bounce off each other to such a point that they go into hysteria. They'll go crazy. And if someone takes damage in the crowd, everyone else takes damage, they will die too. Very scary ability, and it's basically like a cognito hazard. Like, no matter what happens, like, if she just activates her ability, she doesn't have to even physically touch you. She could kill you if someone gets damaged, and it's wild. It's a very powerful ability that could easily destroy people that like to be in large crowds or have a lot of help to be able to bring someone down. So Wrath effectively, like, completely nerfs anyone that is required to have teamwork. It forces someone to be on their own to be able to fight Wrath. If you're on your own, you might have a better of a chance. Her authority might not work as well, but we also seen that she has capabilities of magic and also the ability to use a whip. So she is definitely not weak by any means, even in the physical and magical combat degree. That is disregarding her authority. So whoever has to fight her, which we do find out in this episode, we'll talk about in a second, obviously they're going to have a very uphill battle. Then we got to look at Greed, which obviously Subaru having Reinhard enter into the battlefield with him makes perfect sense. Greed is someone that, as we've currently seen for Season 2 and Season 3, he doesn't get damaged. He doesn't get hurt. We saw him in Season 2 in Amelia's flashback when Sloth, or Petalugius, he attacked Greed. His head got turned a little bit, and he turned around and looked at Sloth like it was nothing. He brushed off the unseen hand, wasn't even injured, and you see Sloth literally bleeding out and getting absolutely damaged by using unseen hand. Greed, at this point in time within the story, we have not really seen him take any damage. The only person that has managed to really do anything to him was Pandora, and even then, she didn't hurt him. She just says, "You're back at home with all your wives." So yeah, he, at this point, seems a little bit invincible, even more so than even Capella herself. I'll talk about more of her in a second, but Greed is obviously incredibly powerful. He, like I said, hasn't taken damage, and even despite the fact at the end of the episode where Reinhard and Subaru knock down the door and they, interrupt the wedding, obviously you see a brief scene where he gets hit, and he's knocked back and all that, and it's very funny and comedic, but he takes no visible damage. His outfit's not damaged, his hair's not messed up, he just seems a little bit annoyed, all things considered. And this is very telling, because even Elsa, at this point, at the beginning of her fight with Reinhardt, she was taking damage. Now, obviously, I don't think Reinhardt was fully trying, but it does not disregard that Reinhardt is incredibly OP and broken. And the fact that he basically initiated a surprise attack on Greed, and Greed took literally non-visible damage here, besides obviously his ego, says enough. This is not going to be a quote-unquote easy fight. It's going to definitely be challenging, and obviously I know what he's capable of because I'm a light novel, web novel reader, but I'm not going to tell you anime onlys that, like, what his abilities are, but I will say, just looking at him in general, his authority most likely is very broken. That's all you can really consider at this point, from what we have witnessed from him just from the anime scenes alone. Now, getting back into the beginning discussion, we also have to talk about, Capella. Capella is another Sin Archbishop. She is someone that literally has pretty much immortality. Like, we don't know necessarily if it's quote-unquote, like, immortality as the level of, like, Boo or Cell and Dragon Ball, but she is capable of insane hyper-regeneration that is leagues beyond anything we have seen from ReZero, but also, it is really just ridiculous. We actually saw when her face was peeled off, like, legitimately peeled off, her whole face reconstructed, and it was a very gruesome scene, but her ability is insane. Like, people that do damage to her, potentially rip off her limbs, her face, whatever, she's just gonna heal it back. Her regeneration is going to be quite an issue. Obviously, if we're talking about real-life circumstances, maybe fire might be able to stop her regeneration, but this is someone that apparently has dragon blood in her, and if anyone knows about dragons, dragons are usually, not always, but usually immune to fire. So, fire might not even work on Capella because she has dragon blood in her. So, with all things considered, Capella is pretty powerful. She's durable, but she potentially could be imprisoned, so to speak, potentially. But at the very least, when it comes to her fighting strength, though, her abilities to shapeshift, turn into potentially dragons, etc., she is a pretty tough fight as well. I would think that she would be an easier fight than Greed, though, for Reinhardt, but I think that Capella is definitely a very strong second-place contender in terms of power. Now, then we gotta get into Gluttony, which is a very mysterious figure that we only know very spread few details about. We know that Gluttony needs a name to be able to devour your very soul and name, etc. Basically turn you into what Rim currently is. We know that Gluttony's ability is pretty freaking powerful. We don't know necessarily at this current time in the anime the full-on blown limitations, but Gluttony is scary, because obviously if Gluttony gets their hands on your name and everything, you disappear from the world, so to speak. People forget about you. Obviously, Subaru will remember you, but Subaru's got his hands full. He's got his hands full, obviously, with Greed at the moment, at the end of the episode, so whoever has to fight Gluttony, if they, you know, let's say they have like 50 soldiers, okay? Gluttony gets his hands on 10 of those soldiers, 10 of those soldiers no longer exist, and those 40 soldiers no longer even remember that those 10 soldiers existed. You can see the difficulties here. And so, Gluttony easily just removes people from the battlefield very quickly, and it's, in a way, very dangerous into the similar regard as Raph's ability of just how the more people that are around, the stronger that Raph currently is. And Gluttony's more or less like that. Now, maybe not to the degree of manipulating emotions, but eventually Gluttony could theoretically win a long drawn-out fight if they remove people's existences itself. So, once again, Gluttony is very dangerous, but a very vague individual that we don't really know much about at this current time. So, the question is, will we lose someone? We will have to see. Now, I think I've set the stage up for explaining the strengths and weaknesses of the Sin Archbishops, and so this meaning more or less divvies out who's going to fight them. So let's talk about who will fight them. So Priscilla, she comes into the scene, she walks in all pridefully and all that, all sassy, and the typical Priscilla nature. She slaps Al away, which is absolutely hilarious. This is such a funny scene, but Priscilla pretty much says, I will be fighting Raph, which is just like, that's very, very interesting, because it's like, Priscilla has, at first glance, she has quite an ego. She definitely has a very massive ego. You can definitely see in these last few episodes, she's not a bad person. She has very harsh and blunt words she says, but she clearly cares about people. And I think that this beginning sequence definitely showcases that, even though she doesn't directly say it. And even Subaru picks up on this. For instance, when she comes into the hall, Al obviously is being a simp, he's running after her and all that, she slaps him away. She pretty much says, thanks to your speech, Subaru, you know, it got me here, and that's why I'm going to be able to participate in this. Priscilla more or less said that your speech moved me, Natsuki Subaru. That thanks to you trying to relay your emotions and be completely blunt with everyone, it moved me to such a degree to where I even want to initiate in this fight and give a lending hand. And so it shows that, to some level, Priscilla was able to relate with Subaru's speech. Question is, what exactly did she relate with? Left to be seen. But all we can say right now is that Priscilla, she is offering her help because Natsuki's speech. So, looking at all things considered, why did she decide to choose Raph? Well, we gotta look at what happened the past few episodes. She actively went from shelter to find basically one of her servants. And obviously, thanks to that, she got to see the effects that Raph had on the people, the common people, the peasants that she says, and she realizes that, you know, the bard that's traveling with her is capable of, you know, removing Raph's authority from their minds, and, you know, alleviating it, so to speak. And so Priscilla's been carrying her around to be able to protect herself, but also help people out in these different shelters. And once again, she tries to brush this off a few episodes ago that she wasn't intentionally trying to help people out, but it's very clear that, in a way, indirectly she was. Even if she doesn't want to admit it, her actions directly cause people to not basically end up in a mass riot and hysteria and dying, so to speak. So, Priscilla has actively seen the damage that Raph has done. And the fact that she straight up says she will fight Raph shows deep down, even though Priscilla won't admit it, she does care about people. And her wanting to get rid of Raph basically means that she wants to save the people that are currently in fear and cowering within the city. Says a lot about her character with very few words, very few scenes, and it makes me really love her. And honestly, as someone that has read the novel and stuff, just like seeing it in anime form, it allows me to see it in a lot more clear way. There's a lot more clarity to her character, I would say, in comparison to the light novel. Just seeing it visually, you can really see how her character is, and that she isn't just this egotistical individual that only cares about herself. She does care about people, she just doesn't say it. Anyways, I've talked enough about Priscilla. We know she's going to fight Raph, so we'll have to see how that is in Cour 2. Next up, in terms of who's going to what fight, we have Garfield and Wilhelm fighting basically Lust. They're going after Capella, and Garfield and Wilhelm both have unfinished business with Lust's overall corpse soldiers, so to speak. We get a lot of lore in this episode, a lot of things that are going to shock anime-onlys. For one, we basically found out that the potential possibility of resurrecting the dead, or at the very least animating their corpses, is indeed possible. Wilhelm states himself in this, episode that one of the individuals that he was facing a few episodes back was his wife. That is dead. Wild revelation, and we get even lore to why Wilhelm acted like he did, why he was so upset with himself, why he never visited her grave, why he was upset with Reinhard, all these different type of things. And the lore drop is absolutely incredible. Wilhelm basically says that, the Divine Protection or the Master Swordsman title, it passes on from the generation to the next generation, and it just happens. Passively, so to speak. And in this case, while Wilhelm's wife was fighting the White Well and holding, the White Well from hurting anyone, basically, her Divine Protection, or the Master Swordsman title, passed on to Reinhard in mid-fight. And I think anyone that obviously remembers the fight of the White Well, how powerful it is, and how many people it did take to bring that thing down. So imagine someone that doesn't have a sword, because Wilhelm took her sword away, and also, in the middle of the fight, loses her, basically, Reinhardt OP-ness in the middle of the fight. She becomes an ordinary woman in that moment, and obviously, she ended up dying to the White Well. So, ever since then, basically, there's been a lot of burden placed on Reinhardt's shoulders, because when he gained his divine protections, the blessings and stuff of the world, it basically meant that he was responsible for his grandma's death. Very sad. It's a very sad circumstance that really gives a lot more detail to Reinhardt's character, that despite him being incredibly overpowered, very strong, basically a walking nuke, when you look at his track record, he loses so much. He continuously loses, despite the fact that he is basically the most powerful entity within the series. Let's look at this. He lost his grandma the day he gained power. He is hated by his grandpa to an extent, or not anymore, but used to be. He is hated by his very father. He has actively always been treated as this perfect individual, even though he is not. He believes he's not. Nobody ever views him like a human being. They just view him like a walking freaking weapon. And so he's a very isolated individual that doesn't have any friends, doesn't have anyone that really he could talk with on a human level. He's very lonely. That is definitely something you get from his character. And anytime we've seen him initiate combat, if it wasn't Elsa, for instance, thinking about a few episodes back with the Raph fight, Garfield was a hero, but obviously he fell to that end and a lot of people died around him, which showcased a crack in his overall facade, that he isn't a perfect individual. He still makes mistakes regardless of how overpowered he really is. And it showcases that even the most broken characters can still have fundamental flaws. And it showcases the excellent writing capabilities that Tappe has to be able to write an OP character in such a different degree. He doesn't necessarily have to seal off the character to be able to progress the plot. Take that however where shots were fired. But anyways, all I'm going to say is that Reinhardt, he has experienced so much loss. He continuously takes L's, and when Subaru entered his life at the beginning of Season 1, his life started to take a different turn. He met Felt. He found someone that he could actually serve as a knight. She treats him literally like garbage, and obviously not in a way to where, saying you're too perfect or whatever, but Felt treats him like a human. And I think even her degrading him to a certain degree, even though it comes off very harsh and mean, he probably likes it because it's the first time in his life either people are treating him like an actual weapon and absolutely afraid of him, or, he's someone that is just buttered up to because they could potentially get a good standing within royalty or whatever if they play on his nice side. Or they always see him as a perfect person and he can do no wrong. And Reinhardt clearly does not like that title. He doesn't like that those words really sting him very deep. So Felt treating him like she does probably is very relieving. But on top of that, Subaru's words within this episode, he basically straight up says to Reinhard, like, you know, you make up for my flaws, and I will make up for yours. And I think this comes off very emotional to Reinhard. You even see his reaction to when Subaru brings this up, and he gets very happy about this, because we know to some degree that Reinhard is capable of understanding, like, someone's mind. Like, he's able to read them to a degree thanks to his divine protections. So he probably understands that in that moment when Subaru said that to him, that Subaru was being truthful. That Subaru's like, I will like help you out wherever you falter, wherever your flaws are, I will help you out. And this probably means so much to Reinhard, someone actually seeing him like a freaking human instead of like I said, a monster. It's great. It really says a lot about his character. But anyways, getting into the point, Reinhard and his lore we got in this episode is just straight up incredible. We're finding out more about him, how he got his power, what happened with Wilhelm, and then also with Wilhelm's wife that's potentially going to be a main antagonist of this upcoming Cour. It's going to be very fun. I can't wait to see that, because it's going to be more of a continuation of Wilhelm's character arc from the end of Season 1, and he's an absolutely stunning character that continuously develops, and he's just, his connection with Subaru has gotten even more interesting as this series progresses, and I'll segue into that one in a moment. But anyways, talking about Garfield, he has some unfinished business with the 8-armed man, Kurgan, I think I said his name right, and we know why, because obviously what happened to Mimi in episode 2 of ReZero Season 3, Mimi got decimated, absolutely destroyed, and obviously Garfield feels very responsible, for good reason for it, and he wants to get some payback. He has definitely felt very inferior, very weak since he came to this town, and this is a follow-up to his character development that we saw at the end of Season 2, that Garfield was, you know, a big fish in a very small pond. He wasn't in the ocean, he thought he was the strongest, but in reality, he's not. Elsa, you know, he fought, incredibly powerful individual, but let's be honest, anyone that has either recently watched that or read that knows that the only reason why he won was thanks to absurd luck. She moved out of the way to be able to save Meili, and, you know, that caused Elsa to be crushed by a boulder. If she didn't get distracted in that brief moment, Elsa didn't show some humanity, Garfield would have lost. But he won, obviously. And luck, in a way, is a certain set of skill, too. But it does not change the fact that Garfield has, you know, effectively realized that he isn't that strong. He has a lot to improve upon. He keeps meeting monster after monster, like Wilhelm, to Reinhardt, obviously. And then, obviously, the 8-armed man that, you know, absolutely decimated Mimi and himself. So, He knows his flaws, his limitations, and he wants to grow as an individual and be able to be a proper shield for Amelia's camp. So that is why Subaru sends him off. It's like, you need to deal with this. It's like, as much as I want you there to be able to help me take back Amelia from Greed, I need you to be able to handle your business because you need to grow too. You have some stuff you got to do, and it shows the trust as well that Subaru has with those around him. It once again goes along with the growth he got in Season 2, with when Otto punched the crap out of Subaru. He's like, hey, rely on your friends, you know, we can do stuff for you. And Subaru at one time stopped trying to do everything on his own and allowed everyone to be their own pieces on the chessboard, so to speak. So yeah, that's effectively what happened. Anyways, they're going after Capella. Curious to see how that one's going to go. Then we got to look at Gluttony. Otto is dealing with Gluttony along with Julius, and there's not really much to really say there, but obviously that's dangerous. I've already talked about the vagueness of Gluttony, and there's not really much I could really say about the situation from what we know. Julius is incredibly powerful, obviously, but can he fight someone like Gluttony that has been an absolute monster or devil to the population of the ReZero-verse? We will have to see. And then on top of that, we can finally move into Greed, which I talked a lot about Reinhardt. We already know Subaru's capabilities, so I don't really need to necessarily get into that. But Greed is going to be quite a fight. I mean, thankfully, Amelia's there, too. Amelia will be able to help out, and I know people will be like, wait, Amelia's gonna help out? I mean, yeah, we know how powerful she is. I mean, let's look at her backstory. Amelia literally was shattering Pandora like 50 freaking times, okay? Instantly. She froze an entire forest instantly, that even in the lore of ReZero, the snow, the ice, is continuously expanding to this very day within the world of ReZero. Her mana capability, her magic power is legitimately insane. So, she definitely can fight. She is not weak by any means. In fact, She is easily one of the most powerful characters within the story, at least what we've seen so far. She is very powerful. Which, I guess this is a perfect segue to talk about Amelia, since I've seen a lot of confusion around her character with this ending sequence of the episode and with Greed. So Amelia does a very big and long speech here to Greed, basically saying that marriage is supposed to be the happiest moment of your life, you're supposed to smile, you're supposed to be able to give each other joy, all these different type of things, and it comes off very beautiful, romantic, and naive. Amelia is that type of character, and it perfectly reflects her emotions and her development that she's gotten since the beginning of Season 1. And the way she basically just does not let Greed talk at all in this exchange is honestly hilarious, because we know how he is. He's like, you're trampling on my rights and all this type of stuff. I mean, he even does it. And this whole conversation is just like, Amelia, are you actively trying to piss Greed off? Like, we know he's powerful. Very, very powerful. And this entire exchange just looks like Amelia has no regard for her own life, at least in the anime. And this, like I said, this gets into the discussion I've seen around this. A lot of people were like, what was Amelia gonna do if Reinhard and Subaru didn't enter in through that doorway? Amelia looks like she would have died. Like, let's be honest. Like, would she have died? 90% chance, yeah, maybe. But the point is that it looks like Amelia in this moment is just very suicidal. It looks like she just doesn't care about her life and that she's just willing to throw it away just to disregard Greed and say, I don't want to marry you. Which is fine. It keeps true to her commitments and what she has said in the past. But it feels very like, wow, you really did not think this through whatsoever. But that's actually not the case. And this is where I think fundamentally this is the biggest issue I think Season 3 has had. Amelia in this moment in the light novel, her mind was dead set on initiating a fight with Greed. Like, she was gonna straight up fight him. Like, she in this moment, if Subaru and Reinhard, she didn't even know they were coming. But if they didn't show up, Amelia was straight up gonna attack Greed. Like, that's exactly what was gonna happen. There was gonna be a full-blown brawl between the two, and she was going to fight to not just protect herself, but all the other wives that were within that church, or the wedding ceremony, so to speak. So, yeah, I think that point was definitely not covered properly within this episode. I think what would have made this scene go a long way would have seen like maybe some form of eye shards or something Amelia was showing, or maybe she had an ice dagger or something she was holding in her hand, something like that. I don't know. There could have definitely been ways to showcase that Amelia wanted to have a plan of action, even if there was no internal monologue being shown, but obviously we didn't get that. I think one of the big reasons is because the animators wanted to paint this as like a, you know, a wedding crash scene, a damsel in distress type scene, maybe inspired by Shrek to a degree. I don't really know, but all I'm gonna say is that it does make Amelia look a little bit stupid in this scene, when in reality she is far from it. So with that being said though, this episode is straight up, it's incredible. We got a lot about Greed's character, we get a lot about Amelia, and I guess, yeah, let's segue into Greed for a second. So we come to find out what he expects from his wives, what he wants from them and all that. He wants them to never smile, never show happiness, and it's such a gross and wild thing to say. And the reason why he says this is because he wants them to always have an eternal expression of just, like, blankness where he first met them. And he's like, when they smile, their face gets so gross and ugly. He just doesn't like the weird, awkward smiles, etc. And I'm just like, yo, you are a despicable individual. He's such a shallow person, and it's ironic that he basically calls Amelia shallow for things about names and stuff, when he basically does the exact same thing by someone's appearance with a smile. He's such an interesting character, but he is such, let's just be blunt, he's an asshole. He is a despicable, gross individual, but my goodness, he is a good antagonist. He really is. His voice actor really is giving an A game for these scenes, and I cannot wait to just see Reinhard and Subaru absolutely body this individual in the upcoming episodes. It's gonna be freaking glorious. So, I saved the best for last. Let's talk about Crush's situation and just how bad this is. This is a very grotesque scene that really showcases a lot about Felis's character, Crush's character, Subaru's character, Wilhelm's character. There's so much to take away from this scene. And I already talked about this briefly at the beginning of this video, but one thing that this scene showcases is that Felis is going through more or less a very Subaru-like character moment. And what I mean by this is that Subaru had a very hard lesson to learn in Season 1. That he realized he was weak, he was powerless, he couldn't do anything, he was pathetic, he was a loser, he had to rely on people to do anything for him, even to save the woman he loved, Amelia. He could not do it on his own. And it took him a long time, deaths, even multiple deaths, to really come to that conclusion of realizing that moment for himself. And Felix is going through that himself right now within the show. And obviously Felix doesn't have the capabilities of dying to learn these mistakes. So it's going to be a long, gradual process. And the moment where Felix is like, I can't do anything to the one I want to save most, it's very sad. Because obviously this comes off as a very Subaru-like moment. And that Felix just has a lot of self-hatred. There's a lot of hatred for himself that he cannot save Crush, heal Crush, and do the thing that, you know, Felix wants to do for Crush. It's very sad. It's a very emotional moment. And you can just see the absolute defeated look. But Subaru, in his own way, he tries to encourage Felix, like, look, just because you can't save Crush, you are a very powerful healer, one of the best in the entire country. You have a lot of people you could save, things that you could do that no one else in this world can. And that is very true. That is not Subaru glazing Felix up, trying to make Felix feel better. Basically, Subaru's being honest. And I think that this comes from a place of absolute truth that Subaru learned the hard way, and Felix is obviously learning this as well. So I think that this is a great scene, and it gives so much development for the character, and I'm curious to see where this growth goes as the series progresses, because this has been a very minor subplot really developing basically since the beginning of Season 2, ever since Crush lost her memories and no longer remembered who she was, which that gets into what happened to her. So yeah, Crush is, not in a very good state. I mean, her body is ravaged by dragon blood, her eyes messed up, you see the veins and skin all distorted. She is very, very grotesque. Like, she looks grotesque. And it's sad. It's very sad because she was declared as one of the most beautiful candidates within the royal selection. And the fact you see her in this state is just, it's truly jaw-droppingly sad, because it's like her interaction with Subaru has effectively destroyed her. Like, she has lost her memories. Her body basically is destroyed at this point. She is not what she once was. And despite that, she does put on a smile here, but it definitely has to be a very painful and sad existence right now. And Subaru walks up to her, and he, obviously feeling responsible, he tries to take the curse away from her. He puts his hand on her, and it goes within his own arm, and it destroys his hand. And I think that this showcases, once again, Subaru's character of his self-hatred. But I feel like if Crush didn't stop him within this moment and have actually care for Subaru to a degree, Subaru would have allowed his entire body to become disfigured to save her. And that's crazy. It is actually a crazy moment. And it makes you wonder exactly, can she truly ever be healed? Will Subaru ever be healed? There's so many things to really take away from this, but it's such a sad sequence. And I especially love the very subtle and like little acknowledgement that Wilhelm has here for Subaru's hand. He doesn't mention it, like he doesn't say any words really here. He just bows and says thank you, but he doesn't ever bring up Subaru's hand or even acknowledge how like grotesque or whatever it looks. And I think that is a great moment. It once again shows that Wilhelm really respects Subaru so much. He looks at Subaru pretty much like a son or a grandchild at this point, and it's adorable, and it's just, there's just so much respect here. You can feel it from the screen, and this is the beauty of animation, honestly. But I guess that's about it. I think I've covered everything that needed to be discussed with this episode. If there was anything I missed, forgive me. But, yeah, great episode overall. I love ReZero, and I'm sad we're gonna have to wait another 2 months to see more of it, but the wait will be worth it. I might, honestly reread Arc 5. Might do some individual videos of upcoming content for the anime. I might do that. But anyways, be safe, stay healthy, and I love you guys. Chibi out.